Um, I grew up in South Jersey, little beach town in Jersey, with a large family, 8 kids. And my dad had a dinner theater when I was growing up, so I grew up on the stage at a very young age. And I was doing great in the first, out of the gate, I guess. And right around 12 or 13, I was introduced to alcohol, and I went from here to almost overnight into a whole nother, I became a whole nother person, actually. It took me about a year to completely destroy everything that I had built and worked for and whatever at that young age, and was basically going into high school and was ready to quit, and was over parents and when to be home, and alcohol was I can't tell you the feeling I got when I drank, but it was the answer. And so I decided I couldn't handle it anymore. I had to run away. And so at that time it was 1982. So I think it was Fort Lauderdale was the big thing, and I was on the East Coast, and it was kind of cold. And so I was like at a keg party, and I grabbed my closest buddy and I said, "Let's go. We're going to Fort Lauderdale, and I'm starting over. I'm getting out of this place." And so, we stole my dad's Cadillac and drove down to Fort Lauderdale at almost 14. I could barely see over the steering wheel. And I was drunk as we left. And I remember coming to in Washington, D.C. The sun's coming up, and I'm driving this Cadillac Fleetwood, and my buddy's in the car, and I got like 7 suitcases, all my life's belongings, and I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do? And I had this overwhelming sense of sadness, of just like, I just left my whole life. And I knew I couldn't turn back. And so I had to keep going. And I just was like, well, I did it, and this is it. I gotta move on. So I did, and we made it. We went down to Fort Lauderdale. We made it down there. And that didn't last long. We bumped into somebody, and we shacked up for a couple days, and long story short, our parents had tickets for us waiting, and we had to go back home, and they were just like, "Okay, we're going to pretend like nothing happened, and we're just going to, move on." And it just, we don't know they didn't know what to do. They were like, So, yeah, so at that point, I lasted another couple months, and I said, you know what, I got to go. And I went and did the same thing. And I went back to Fort Lauderdale, and it was getting ugly. And at that point, I wandered. I ended up coming back to New Jersey, and long story short, I went to treatment. A judge ordered me to the treatment center, to this place called White Deer in the mountains in Pennsylvania. And it was, I went in kicking and screaming. I was like, "Oh, I'm not an addict. I'm not an alcoholic, blah, 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 blah." And I was, a teenager, and I was, I had earrings and shaved. I was a mess. And I had a breakthrough when I was in treatment. And I let go. I said, "You know what? All right. I admit I got a problem." and I let go. And at that point, everything turned around. And I had 5 or 6 years of sobriety after that. We ended up moving down to Florida, actually, the family. And I went into NA and AA, and I had a really good recovery, actually, at a very young age, and was in and out of therapy, and I was loving it and enjoying it, because I knew that if I didn't do that, that my answer was to completely rebel and be a maniac. So I kind of went the other way and tried a different route, and it was working. And the only thing is that a buddy of mine in NA was going to California, so we threw him a going away party, and I ended up meeting a stripper. This is when I was junior in high school down in Florida, and I ended up moving in with her actually when we came back from LA, and my parents ended up moving back to New Jersey. I stayed in Florida and said, "Don't worry, I'll finish high school down here." And I didn't go back to school at that point, except when it was senior year, when everybody else was graduating. Again, I had this flash in front of my eyes, like, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" And so I took a high school equivalency test and went into junior college, and then I decided, well, what am I going to do with my life? So I like acting, and I've been on the stage since I was 10. My dad had a dinner theater, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to study acting. I know that's not the best thing to study at school, but I have to do something that I like. So I got a scholarship and went into this great college in Winter Park, Florida, and got my BA in theater arts. But that voice was right there. That monkey was on my back the whole time. And it was senior year and a senior week and Florida, and I was 5 years sober and just thirsty. And oh God, it took me a week. The idea of, I just remember thinking about it, and I just like savored it for every day. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it today. No, I'm going to wait. And man, when I took that drink, it's my nemesis. It's what I have to battle. And it was so powerful. And it was, at that point I knew that it wasn't going anywhere. So I just let it on, and I got into a conservatory in New York City for acting. And so I graduated college, went to New York, and it's a 2-year program. And in that first year, it was great. I was on Broadway. I was studying, acting with some of the best teachers in New York, and Al Pacino was on the board of directors, and it was just great school, great experience. But my head was so far up my ass, I didn't even realize, here I am on Broadway going to, since I was a kid, that's all I wanted to do. And I didn't even realize what I had. And, you have to be asked back to the second year. And I remember I went to the meeting with the president of the school, and he said, "Billy, the teachers love you. They say they want you to come back, but they're leaving it up to you, and they want you to make the decision carefully and make sure that you come back. If you come back, that you come back 100%, and that you would know what that meant." And I know they know, they could see me struggling. It was a very intimate year because they were in my business. We were studying characters and, going through it. It was intense. So they could see me struggling with alcohol and drugs. And they didn't want me they wanted me to respect my art a little bit more, my craft. And I understood what they were talking about, because it's not fair to do that. And so I said, let me think about it for a couple weeks. And I spent the next 2 weeks in a bar, I'm 21 years old and 22. And, and I went back to the president of the school. I said, "Yeah, I think I have some exploring to do. I have to go, discover some things and figure some things out." And in the back of my head, I'm saying, "That's all right. I'll come back to my dream. It's no big deal." And it really didn't set in. It didn't sink into what I had done. It took about a year or two, and then I realized what the power of drugs and alcohol at that point had compounded, and more and more and more. And I realized how far gone I was and what I had done. And it's just like, there's moments in life that are indelible, where you just kind of, where you get glimpses of them as you go. And it's like, and that's just one of those moments where it was just like, God, it was just really a sad moment. Like, it was just, I couldn't touch it. It was gone. It was gone. And I knew that. And, and so I I then I put on my seatbelt, and I had spent the next 10, 12 years until I was like 33, drowning that guilt and beating myself up and partying as hard as I was a binge drinker and partier. So I would just go until I couldn't stop, and then I would stop, and then just recover until I could walk again, get my sense about me, and then go back and dive into it again. And it's just like I just always had somebody yelling at me like, Billy, Billy, Billy. It was always a girlfriend or a boss or somebody trying to get me to. I was late. It was a mess, and I was tired. And at 33, I was back in Florida again, and I was gonna kill myself. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I hit another bottom basically, and I had gotten sober with a friend of mine. She had remained sober the whole time, and she was out in California. And so I called her, and she said, "Come on out to California." And I came out with like $20 and a lot of willingness, and came out to this group called the Pacific Group, and it was a really strong AA group. And man, I grabbed it quick, and I got a job pretty much like within the next week. I moved in with somebody that needed a roommate within the next week, and then I got a car a couple months later, and I was working within 6 months, life was completely different. I was working out. I was down in Venice Beach, working out during this, in the sunrise. I got the Pacific Ocean, and it was just like, those moments, just working out. And it's just like, God, where was I? I was going to kill myself 6 months ago. And here I am. Life is completely, better. And it's turned, and it was good. And it was, but man, the addiction, the alcoholic, the monkey, it never leaves, and it never left. And it was, I was approaching my second year. I was going to get my 2-year medallion, and I kind of drifted away from the group a little bit. Wasn't going to as many meetings, and my ex-girlfriend from Florida moved out here, which was a bad idea, and that was the start of falling back into some patterns, and I was like, oh, I can lean on that a little bit, and I prepared myself for a relapse. And I went out one weekend and completely destroyed everything that I worked for this 2 years here, and it killed me. I walked around like a zombie for a week in Hollywood, like, oh my God, what did I just do? And I had no idea what I was going to do, and I knew that I wanted to die, but I didn't have the balls to kill myself. And deep down, I didn't really want to die. Because life's been good at sometimes, and I wanted it back. I wanted to be back on top. I wasn't willing to get sober and do the right things to do it, I guess. The right thing, I guess, at that point would have been to have picked, just dusted off and got right back in and jumped right back in. But I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So it is what it is. I knew that I couldn't do it. I didn't have the strength, so I was a zombie. And then I bumped into this crystal meth. And I hate to say it, but it was a godsend. And I believed it was at the time. And I kind of, I don't know how, it saved my life. It really did. I realized that it cured my depression immediately. I didn't want to kill myself anymore all of a sudden. And I was a mess when I drank, I was horrible. I mean, I was the guy you didn't want to be around that came in. You were like, it was like, oh God, this guy, here he is, quick, hide. And with meth, it was different. I figured out how to behave correctly, and made me actually responsible. It was strange. The formula that I had been looking for all this time was right there, and I embraced it, and of course here I am, shooting meth, and I'm praying as I'm shooting, with gratitude. It just didn't make sense. It was bittersweet. I was using it to substitute, and it worked. And I think the best thing to have done would have been to, at maybe, whenever, would to have been left that alone, and then when I got strong enough to get sober or whatever, maybe not sober, but maybe move on to the next phase. But I didn't, and I let it, and I just kind of, man, here I am. It's 2000. That was 2005. It's 2022. Oh my God! So it's been over 20 years that I've been, shooting dope, and I couldn't support myself ever when I was, drinking and doing drugs. I always leaned on, a girlfriend or something like that. But when I got on meth, I completely changed and was, it has a strange sexual connotation to it, and it kind of opened me up a little bit. And I was already very comfortable around guys. I grew up in the theater, so I was, all my friends were always gay, and it was just like, I felt more, in the theater, it's not a gay thing. It's just whatever. So I realized that there was a lot of money to be made, especially in LA, and I was right near West Hollywood, and it was just like Craigslist was just starting up. It was actually a really interesting time, and there was a brief period before the psychos got on Craigslist, and it was actually really, really cool site to get onto and meet people. It only lasted. It was a brief window, and so I was dealing drugs, and I was doing erotic massages. Most of my clients were men. Some of them were couples, and then there was an occasional female. And I got a call one day from this female, and she gave me her address. It was up in Laurel Canyon, and I was like, oh wow! I was so hungry for a female. I was like, I can't wait. So I went. I met this girl, and she was beautiful, and I moved in 2 weeks later, and she was not the right girl to fall in love with. I don't know what I was falling in love. I think it was her situation that I fell in love with. I don't know, but we had a very, very intense relationship for about 9 months, but it was ugly. It was really ugly. And I explored and, sides to myself and parts of sex, and it was really crazy. She introduced me to something called rough sex, and and believe it or not, I was actually, very tame up until that point. And so the type of sex we were having was really, really rough. She wanted to be knocked out, basically, and have to come to and kind of, figure out who's fucking her and whatever. And that was her rush. She was a beautiful blonde girl who got her way. And so she got off on, she wanted to be, slapped and put in her place, and that got, and I was like, so I found a happy medium in there. I did it to where, it wasn't too much, but to where I felt comfortable, and we had, we were shooting dope, having rough sex, and, basically what happened is it ended, with me in jail, and with 4 charges on me, 2 counts of corporal injury, false imprisonment, and sodomy by force. And man, that's another indelible moment in the cop car going, oh my God, what is happening? And I remember saying to the officer, I'm like, how long is it? What's going? They didn't even, I mean, if I'd have known what was coming up, I don't think I would have been able to handle it, but it was just moment by moment at some point. So here I am going into the LA County Jail with a sex charge, and it's not the place you want to be with a sex charge. They by law have to protect pedophiles, but if you have a regular sex charge, they don't have to. They're not obligated to protect you, but you're as good as done anyway. So it's like, so I was, beat up immediately when I got in, and was like, holy shit! I'm still trying to get her out of my system and trying to come to with what just happened, and I'm like, I can't deal with it. So I was like, I was trying to have a nervous breakdown. I couldn't do it, but I was like, so what do I do? So I figured out how to get into solitary confinement for 30 days, and for a couple of weeks, I just cleansed myself and got my head right and got her out of my head, and just realized that I needed to get back out in the general population because time moved a lot faster, and it was crawling in that cell. So I was not going to have it. So I got back out in general population. I just lied. I just, people asked me what I was in here for. I said domestic charge, and that was it. And because it's not like prison where they know your business too much because it's so transient, so you just lie, and everybody else is lying in there anyway. They're all lying. So it's like, I was fine, but I spent 10 months in there because first of all, they said, well, okay, you can go to prison for 3.5 years. And I was like, 3.5 years, go to prison? I'm not going to prison. There's no, I'm not guilty, first of all, of the charges that you have on me. I said, I'll admit I'm guilty of something, but not of these charges. And so here's, if I had some money and I had an attorney, here's where our system is fucked up. If I had an attorney, I could have very easily have gotten that reduced to a correct charge, which I gladly would have, but what happened is I ended up getting a state-appointed attorney. The district attorney that was fighting my case was up for a judgeship in 3 months. So, it was all bad. My ex-girlfriend, her dad is a billionaire and a Republican. So, they put $1 million bail on me. They had 4 charges. If I was found guilty of these 4 charges, I was going away for like 20 years, and which was a death sentence. And I was like, man. So I said, well, then, you know what? We'll go to trial because there's just no way you're going to be able to convince 12 people that's what I did. There's just no way. And so we, postpone. And finally, we get to trial, and it was brutal, man. I was in trial for like a 2.5 week trial, and I had to let go. At that point, really, I found God again, and it's not like it was a jailhouse thing because I've had God in my life always, since I was a kid. It's just as I've grown up, it's kind of evolved into my own thing. I've personalized it a little bit more, but this was definitely another moment where I let go and truly, turned it over because I really had no choice at that point, and so long story short, the trial ended in a hung jury on all 4 charges, which was, I didn't know what it was. I was like, what is it? A hung jury? What is it? I didn't, it was like, I'm going through all this. Our system is really complicated when you're going through it, if you've never been through it. And I'm like, okay, so a hung jury, I know that that's actually a good thing because it means that they didn't do what they set out to do, which was to put me away. But I didn't win because and they refiled the case all over again. And I was like, oh my God. So I was completely wiped out. But so I had to go back 2 weeks later. At that point, I was getting advice from this old a black man he'd been through the system, and he was telling me what to do and what to look for. And he said, you know what? He said, don't worry, they're going to have a better offer for you now. He goes, they have to. They just spent all that money and it didn't work. So now they have to give you a better deal. It's just part of the game. And they did. They had a great deal, kind of. The one thing I wanted was to get out of jail. That's all I wanted. I could handle anything else that they were giving me. I just needed to get out of jail because my life was being threatened and I was dying in there. And so that was one of the options. They said get out of jail, but also you sign a plea agreement that says you're guilty, and then 5 years formal probation, a year of sex offender classes, and then register as a sex offender for the rest of your life. And my attorney's going, oh, you're not signing that. You're not signing that. And I said, the hell I'm not. I'm not going to trial with you again either, because he was working with the DA and giving her, it was a horrible situation. So I signed a plea agreement. I got out of jail. And here I am. It's 12 years. It's been about 12 years since that happened, since I got out. And man, there's time again. Boom. And it's just that my drug addiction took on new, I did the 5 years formal probation almost perfectly. There was a small little hiccup, but thank God something was on my side. And then about 3 years ago, my mother died, and so I added to. I was doing fine with the crystal meth, but the mom dying was a little much for me, and so I brought on heroin to just numb out and to not feel. And you know what? It worked. It really worked. As much as it could, until, so here I am now, and I'm at a point where I've done everything that I shouldn't have done, and my life is, I can't, if I want a better life, I know that I have to leave drugs and alcohol behind, and I'm finally at a point where I want to do that, and so now the challenge has been trying to get into a detox, and it's kind of challenging, actually. I'm ready now, and it's like there's a waiting list on some places, and then Medi-Cal, some places don't take this, and so it's like, gosh. So I've been, the past couple of weeks, I've been trying to get into a detox, basically, so I hope I didn't glamorize that too much, but the main thing is that I've paid looking back at my life, there's times when I say, God, I wish I should have done something different, but I did what I did because I believed that I didn't have a choice. So of course I regret leaving New York and leaving school, but I left because that alcoholic voice was so loud that I didn't really believe that I had a choice. So it's kind of, that's what I was dealing with a lot of the times, and, if I had to do it over again, I'd do it differently, of course, because just for the sake of having a different experience, because the one that I chose was really, man, I'm tired. I'm really tired. And I know that anything that's coming up is not as nearly is going to be as tough as the path that I've carved out for myself has been brutal. So sobriety is really not that hard. I mean, it is. Showing up and being responsible is one of my biggest fears, but when you really break it down, it's so much simpler and joyous and gratifying compared to a life of drugs and alcohol. I mean, I mean, I just remember when I was making that decision, I was kind of excited, like, oh wow, I've got to, I get to go out and like find myself, and I was like, oh my God, that's what a oof, horrible. That's what it is. What it is.
All right, Billy, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Good luck with the detox.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
The world is a fucking mirror, not a window. We reflect what we project. So if you're seeing anything narcissistic here, anything hateful here, it's because you are in fact that.
All right, Taylor. Taylor, where'd you grow up? Where are you from?
San Diego, California.
What was your mom and dad like?
Well, my kind of a child born in Boston area, and my mother and father, met at a gym. My mom saw my dad, and okay, that was that. And they had me pretty quick. But my dad was in the Marine Corps, had left for boot camp. My mom had thought she wasn't going to be able to be pregnant. She was 35 at the time. My dad was 25, and he went into the Marine Corps kind of quickly. And she called him and said, "Hey, I'm pregnant and I'm going to keep it. This might be my last chance at this." And he said, "Well, all right, let's get married." And they ended up getting married, had quite a tumultuous relationship. They'll both be the first to admit that, which created a lot of tension in the house, right? Yelling and things like that. And my dad, he had his problems with drugs and alcohol, especially getting out of the Marine Corps, that he'd be the first one to admit, right? But that's what brought us to Southern California, actually Orange, Tustin. There used to be an old Chinook base there, which we lived on at first. And then we ended up just staying in Southern California, where my mother's mother, my grandmother, was kind of based out of Chula Vista. From kindergarten all the way up through high school, that's where I grew up.
How would you describe your childhood?
I feel very blessed, even with, the fights and stuff like that. I always felt loved. I never felt unloved. My parents were very supportive of sports. I have a younger sister also. Growing up, going to the beach, my mom's very adventurous. She was a very hard worker. And, we had the, problems with money, and my father kind of, having his bouts with anger and things that he dealt with, which, I understood more and more as I got older, and I was repeating a lot of the same things. That's the truth. But they finally, after about 16 years and a few separations, were like, "Hey, call it quits." We moved up to an area called Poway in North County, San Diego. And that was a great move, a little more affluent area from where we had been. But growing up, all sports all year round, going to the beach, watching Mighty Ducks and fucking getting pumped up and playing roller hockey in the street was how I grew up. And I really, looking back, it set the tone for kind of my adventurous spirit, my willingness to try new things, and just being athletic and being raised around my mother, going to the gym. She was an aerobics instructor. My father was a professional bodybuilder, a very, very avid bodybuilder for most of his life. So I was raised around that. And that's what I think is still, which I tell people, if you're not touching some physical thing, or it's not the foundation of good mental health, is a strong body, a confident body, and morphing your life around eating correctly and training. You don't have to do crazy stuff, but most people are taking medications before they're even working out. And no wonder that we see what's going on in this world today. But to answer your question directly, I feel very good about how I grew up, and very fortunate.
And what'd you do with your life after your school? How far did you go in school?
Yeah, so I actually have a college degree, but it was not smooth. It was not smooth. And the trouble kind of started, like most people who are watching this, in high school, where started drinking, started partying, and I was still a good student in school, very avid athlete, so I had some looks and some possibilities, and I got kicked out of high school, though, for possession of marijuana, and I had brought some heat on myself and things like that, so poof, a lot of those opportunities for playing lacrosse and two sporting in different universities vanished, and I was I lacked self-awareness on such a massive scale. Like, some people are old souls. I'm a very young soul. I had a lot of fucking learning to do, and a lot of hard lessons to learn, kind of the hard way. But I will say, at a very young age, I knew I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. 7 years old. I can tell you exactly when it was. It was October 1992. And we were standing on a hill with my father in Point Loma, looking down into San Diego Bay, and I saw these glow lights. And I asked him what they were, and he said, those are Navy SEALs training in the bay. And I was like, my hair blew back. I was like, what? Like, I still get the chills thinking about it. It was such a profound moment. I was like, whoa. So I was in the library looking up, any story I could find about Green Berets, Vietnam SEALs, watching documentaries, Men with Green Faces, all that stuff was like resonated to me, not in a Rambo romantic sense. I wanted to be like wet in the, like, I just saw it as a very real thing, but who was the guy behind that gun? Like, who was that guy doing that job? I knew that from a very young age that it was what I wanted to do. But as we fast forward, which I was just talking about, all that got shelved for later, for the shit in my face, the girls, the drinking, all that stuff in high school. I mean, in high school, we were going down to Mexico to shoot steroids and back by practice it was, looking back, I thought it was normal, but it was absolutely not normal. But that set the tone for me, and it kind of moved the meter of what was just normal living. I mean, a lot of my friends from high school are dead or in prison, and a lot of them. And so I know it wasn't normal. So that Navy SEAL dream, that goal, was shelved. We kind of got put on the back, and I knew I was going to college also, because that was just an extension of normal school. So I go, well, everyone went to college. My mother's father was a captain in the United States Navy. He was a Naval Academy graduate. So college was just what you did. So that's what I was like, okay. So I ended up going to a small Division III. It was pretty much anybody that would take me, and fucking failed out immediately. I mean, I had a huge car accident the summer before, come back from the river, where I ejected out of a lifted Tundra going on the freeway, and was like 30 meters from the car in the fucking road, and I mean, boom, flew out the passenger. I think I didn't have a seatbelt on. Two guys in the car got super fucked up with skin grafts and everything, and I ejected out just to wake up on the side of the road. And I remember picking my head up going, oh man, I had a sourdough jack in my hand, and I just, whatever reason, I remember that, and that was gone. And I remember seeing my fucking shoes in the road, and I just remember being like, I got straight blown out of my shoes. And then the pain hit, where I realized, man, I had some broken ribs, I dislocated my hip, and I'll get, the paramedics, and I remember the paramedic coming over me, and he goes, holy shit, man, are you okay? Like blown away that I was still alive. And I said, dude, I broke my leg. That's what I said to him. I said, dude, I need some shit. And they pumped me with morphine and put me back, and they popped that. I remember the doctor standing on top of the look on his eyes with he's holding on top of the metal bar or something, and they wrapped me in this sheet, and then he just dropped all his weight on me and popped it back in, and I blacked out. And I walked out of the hospital 2 days later, pretty much fine. Pretty much fine. The doctor was like, I have no idea how you're like not dead. But I walked out with a cane, but I was fine. But that wasn't setting me up going into freshman year of playing football. So I was supposed to stand on the sideline and red shirt, whatever year. And I fucking didn't even go to practice because I was like, what's the point? Was just going to parties, doing whatever, not even showing up to the games, just absolutely just kind of just checked out of that. Of course, the cops and stuff come to my dorm room. I get kicked off the team for marijuana and all that shit. And during this time also, I walked through a plate glass door, cut off my whole face. My whole face fell off. I had to get taken to the emergency surgery to 75 stitches on my face to pretty much put my face back on. The guy did a decent job, but he's looking at me, goes, "Oh, Shane, good looking kid too." I'm like, man, I'm fucking fine. I'm like, okay, man. But it didn't ruin my GQ modeling career. That wasn't in the cards for me. So I'm okay with it. But it was tumultuous. That was kind of what I'm getting at, is I was just stacking up bad things. My poor mom, right? My poor mom, just mortified. And so I burn out of school. Next thing I know, I'm back at my mom's house, going to junior college or trying to work construction in the day, doing masonry, apprentice, just lugging bricks all day, trying to go to school at night, not doing either, and realizing that I'm a fucking loser. I realized after, man, I'm like here, then I'm like a fucking loser. So I decided to start stacking on selling drugs. I was selling ecstasy. I was doing a lot of shit. And, there was just a storm kind of in my heart. And kind of going back to when I was a kid, it was something I wasn't even going to really touch on here, but I'll just touch. I was exposed to some sexual things as a kid that it's not something I haven't even talked about publicly, but it wasn't a family or anything like that. But I mean, there were some things that I kind of remember with a babysitter and also a neighbor, man. It was just things kind of I'm not sure if it skewed how I responded or developed, right? It kind of moved that meter. But, it wasn't something that it confused me because I remember it feeling good. I wasn't penetrated or things like that, but it was just kind of some sexual thing that at a very young age that I'm sure affected the way I operated, right? And so there was kind of this storm in me from just bred in, I think, and then also just how life developed. So now we're into this realm of me back in college and I'm, doing all these bad things. And I had a moment, October 11th, 2004. So I woke up and it was raining. And I remember this homeless guy had said something to me a year before. And he goes, "Hey man, you know what rain means?" I walked by him downtown. I was, "What?" He goes, "It means change." That's all he said to me. That's all he said to me. And I was like, "Yeah, okay, bro, whatever." For whatever reason, I woke up that morning and that guy's voice was fucking booming. Rain means change. And it was raining in Southern California. It doesn't happen a lot, but it was raining and I sat up in this decently nice apartment. I had a decently nice truck, but everything was hollow. It was just, everything felt hollow. I had been trying to play football at another junior college and now I was failing out there also, eating muscle relaxers and just life was fucking, just felt like something was about to come crashing down. And I remember picking up my pre-calculus, which I hadn't done any at a test that day. And I looked at it and I went, I have fucking done nothing. I'm going to fail this too. I'm failing my third college. I called my dad. My dad's been through a lot of shit with, the drugs and the alcohol and all that stuff. I knew I could just talk to him real, and he's very level-headed in that capacity and very willing to help. So I called him and I said, "Man, I need to get the fuck out of here." So he said, "All right, I'll be there in a minute." And he brought one of his homies, because he was in AA at the time. He's been on the wagon, off the wagon type thing. And he was in the good at this moment. So he comes with his buddy. They come and I gave him all the drugs I had, all the cash I had. I said, "I need to get the fuck out of here." I got put in a lockdown facility. It was like a psych ward, for lack of a better thing, but it just worked in the insurance, what we had. And I wasn't coming off drugs. I wasn't on drugs, but my life was unmanageable as fuck, right? I had warrants for my arrest, or I had suspended licenses, just things would come in the mail, I'd just fucking throw them in the trash. Like that's where I was at. So I was in there with fucking crazy ass people. I had an old Marine that was like 40 getting off heroin, and it was some rough nights, right? He's getting off that gorilla. And also people that were psychotic, right? People that were like old patients who had dementia. Like I was locked in there. I had a moment about 5 days in where I'm like, hey, briefing my dad on my plan, what I'm gonna do, right? Which a lot of people, I'm briefing him on my plan, going, man, I'm gonna get out and like start this fucking whatever business, and fucking I'm telling him, and he's just kind of like listening to me, looking at me like, okay, man. And I say, yeah, he's like, you sure you don't want to get out of here, out of San Diego? I was like, no, I know what I'm doing, man. I know what I'm doing. He goes, Taylor, you don't have any fucking shoelaces. And I remember looking down, and all, the shoelaces are taken out of your fucking shoes so you don't kill yourself or some shit in those places. And I went, who the fuck am I about telling anybody what I'm gonna do? I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't have shoelaces. So I said, all right, I'll get out of here. And we got a plane, and I took a one-way trip back to Boston. So I'm 19. I took a one-way trip to Boston, and I moved into my aunt and uncle's basement of their house in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Shout out Gloucester. It was rough at first because I'm kind of going in. I start working landscaping and I had that feeling of isolation. And I'm like, man, I was BMOC and then I kind of felt like I was coming out of this chaos, and I realized, man, I'm living in a basement. Fucking no college credits, like maybe 2 or 3 classes that I had like barely passed. And I'm like, wow, okay. So I started to come out of the fog, got a plan. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to junior college. I'm gonna fucking finish this fucking thing. I'm gonna finish college. I just knew I wanted to do it. And I knew I wanted to go in the military still, but I knew I wanted to finish college. So I got into the local junior college, started kind of talking to the counselors like, hey, here's where I'm at. And man, I locked it the fuck on for about 1.5 years. I was training Muay Thai in Dorchester. I was working landscaping and at a fish market and going to school over full time. And I got straight A's for fucking 1.5 years. Straight A's for 1.5 years with some elevated courses because I had this idea that I might want to be a doctor. So I was doing like some pre-med things, and or I might want to be a plastic surgeon. And I realized later that takes fucking aptitude. Shit's hard. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it set me up well. It set me up decent with my grades that I had the opportunity to transfer back to California where I had in-state tuition and with my mom still living there. So I applied to University of California, Berkeley, University of California, Los Angeles, and University of California, Santa Cruz. And LA and Berkeley told me to fucking kick rocks. And I got into Santa Cruz. And that's where I transferred to. Got back there, and really fortunate to have that campus. If you've ever seen that campus, it's absolutely incredible out in the redwoods. And the minute I got there, I fucking was like, okay, I'm gonna lock it on. I'm not gonna, I had been isolated and just really focused doing my shit. And mind you, there's a couple issues. I had gotten arrested one time in New Hampshire for kind of like being too drunk at a party. Like I still had kind of my friction points. It wasn't all perfect, but pretty damn good. So I get back and I'm like, okay, pretty much the first fucking girl comes knocking on my apartment on the dorm. And she's like, you want to go out? I'm like, yep. Lost all my fucking discipline almost fucking immediately. I hadn't developed that sense of self-worth yet. And that's what I realized much later into my 30s, that I had this underlying lack of self-worth that was rooted in me just not doing the basic daily disciplines to actually build that self-worth up. I had these big ambitions. I was pretty capable. I was pretty charismatic. But there was like a rooted, it wasn't lack of confidence, or maybe it was, or maybe it is, who knows what it is. But there was like I just wasn't doing the right shit, right? Waking up late, fucking drinking, not feeling good, trying to just constantly behind the curve, knowing I'm not living to my full potential. So if you're not living to your full potential, you're stacking karmic debt. You don't have to be doing bad shit to be stacking karmic debt. You can just be not living up to your potential and stacking karmic debt. And that's what I was constantly doing. And during this time, I'm getting in trouble, almost kicked off campus. I get arrested from junior year till I end up finishing senior year probably 8 or 9 times for drunken publics. Nothing bad, not stealing, nothing, but just acting like a fucking knucklehead, right? Being too drunk walking home, cop picks you up. Being, whatever, just most of it was that. And possession of a controlled substance, because I had a prescription without a prescription, a DUI, misdemeanor, right? Driving on a suspended. All these little things I'm stacking up and constantly fighting through while I'm barely squeaking by on courses. I didn't realize the mountain of fucking administrative paperwork and hurdles I had just been stacking on myself to get in the military. I was just so unaware of that, right? I had gotten a DUI, so now I'm riding a bike, right? I had gotten hurt in a fucking jiu-jitsu match while I was up there, so now I'm taking Percocets like Tic Tacs, right? And it wasn't like, but all these small things stacking up, that was just clouding my vision and just making me live so in the now. I knew I was like, yeah, I'll go in the military. So I wasn't setting up internships. I was like, I'm going in the military, but not doing any of the shit I should have been doing to fucking facilitate that. And guess what? I graduated with a degree in politics. And very good day. It took me 5 years to finish a 4-year degree, but I got it done. Surprisingly, even with that, I ended up getting it done. And that later of going in the military had fucking arrived, right? It was time. There was no more later. So I went down the recruiter and I went to the Marines first, which is actually kind of interesting. People ask me about that. They go, why did you go to the fucking Marines first? Well, because I was fucking terrified of failing SEAL training and ending up on a boat. I didn't want that at all. I wanted a gun. I wanted to deploy. That's the only reason I wanted to do this shit. So I was like, the Marines will be the best bet. I walk in there, take the ASVAB, whatever. They kind of start looking at me and they go, bro, looking into my back. They go, dude, you're on fucking probation. You have pending court cases. And I did. And I went, oh, okay. I was that fucking oblivious of what? And that's when reality started squeezing in. I was like, okay. I had been, bouncing in a bar, waiting tables and doing all this stuff and just kind of living with that. We'd go to the bar and drink after, just not really taking shit seriously. So I go, okay, well, all right. Well, I guess I got to kind of get out of Santa Cruz. I'll go back to San Diego and start organizing this shit. So I moved down back to San Diego, back to my mom's house. I'm 23 now, college degree. And I go to a Marine recruiter down there. And I said, okay, well, here's what I'm dealing with. What do I need to do? He goes, dude, you got to get off probation. You're going to either have to wait or get off probation somehow because no branch can touch you, even on an informal probation. So I said, okay. I called the lawyer. I said, here's what's going on. They said, all right, we got a court date with the judge up in Santa Cruz. We're going to brief him up. And this judge, good on him, he said, hey, you want to go in the military? I'm not just going to stamp this shit. I don't know who the fuck you are or what you're going to do. I'm not going to just stamp this. So we'll give you 6 months in jail. I said, all right. I said, let's fucking do it. My lawyer was like, whoa, 6 months in jail, man, for a fucking misdemeanor DUI and some things. Seems a little heavy. But for me, that seemed like a win. So they bumped it down to 4 months. And that's what I fucking did. That's what I did. I turned myself back in up there October 18th, 2008. October 17th. 2008, and went to jail. Fucking lockdown facility, jail in Santa Cruz County, 23 hours, no yard time, no nothing. I didn't see the sun for fucking 3 months because ended up doing 3 months on 4. But what I saw in there was, Mark, what's the destruction of methamphetamine, the destruction of drugs. I had always kind of dabbled in shit, but I wasn't like a fucking drug addict. But these motherfuckers were gone. I saw people poo painting. I saw people fucking crazy coming in after killing their fucking kid. Just observation ward I had to clean because I volunteered to work for the jail just to kind of get moving. I was doing jail laundry. And 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was on the swing shift working jail laundry. So I saw, people coming in, shitting their clothes, just absolute mayhem. It was eye-opening, but I felt good in there. I wasn't in a bad mood. I felt finally I could start clearing up my fucking life and get moved on. It was a powerful time being 23, college degree. I was the only motherfucker in there on misdemeanors. Everyone's either waiting to go to prison or waiting for trial on some serious fucking crimes. So it's a mixed bag. There's some, potentially dangerous situations, and there was some friction. We had some interesting moments. But I had a funny story happen in there that was a moment that I really realized what my decisions had led to. A cop comes in and goes, "Hey, we need two volunteers." He didn't say for what. I said, "All right," because I knew if you volunteered, then they generally would give you an opportunity to eat in their correctional officer galley, which is meant like a real fucking hamburger or something, not that soy product shit. So I volunteered. Next thing I know, I'm getting a hazmat suit put on me. And I'm going, oh, fuck. It's about to go down. Well, me and this other big dude, he's puts on these hazmat suits, and we go in, and we open the door to the observation room, or the observation pod. And I just hear the nurse go, "Oh, no, watch out. He has poo on him." And I'm like, oh, God, now it's starting. And they're pulling this guy out of the padded room, where he was naked and he's covered in shit, and the whole fucking room's covered in shit and blood and whatever. And they pull him out and they put him in the glass, and he's like got a towel half on him, and I'm going, okay. And he's yelling about how gangster he is and how he stole a car and crashed it into a house, or he's like kind of gone, but also kind of there coming out of the fray. And I remember the guy with me, he's like kind of getting pissed, because he's gonna have to go clean this shit with me too. And he goes over to the glass, and the COs are like, "Oh shit," and he bangs on the glass. He goes, "Hey, motherfucker, hey." Dude like looks at him and he goes, "Poo painting ain't fucking gangster." And I remember my whole world I'm going, what the fuck am I doing here, man? This is crazy. And he was right. That's the truest statement ever. Poo painting is not gangster. So we go in and we clear it, pressure wash it, and the time finishes up there. And I walked out December 26, 2008, right day after Christmas. They let me out. My girlfriend at the time picks me up. And while I'm walking out, a CO asked me what I'm going to do. Am I going to be back? And what am I going to do? And I turned and looked at him and I said, "I'm going to go be a fucking Navy SEAL." And he fucking laughed at me, man. Good on him. Looking back, I was fucking delusional. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking. Walking out of jail, telling a motherfucker I'm going to be a Navy SEAL, a veteran. He was a Marine. And he's going, "Okay, man, like whatever you say, bro." I was like, I had put on rugby weight. I was, probably 230 walking out of jail, not all good weight. I was not ready to be a Navy SEAL by any stretch of the imagination, but that was what I told the fucking guy. And that was what it was in my heart. And so I realized I start making a plan, and I go back to my mom's and walk into the Marine officer recruiter. I was still I had said that to that dude, but I was still kind of like, well, let me make sure I can do this right because the Navy SEAL thing kind of seemed like a pipe dream. It kind of seemed like a Hail Mary, but it was what was in my heart. But I had been growing up in San Diego. Like we talked about, Mark, I knew all-American wrestlers. I knew all-American water polo players that tried. Nobody ever made it. And they end up scraping barnacles in the fucking Navy. I was like, well, okay, well, let me try. The Marine officer recruiters said, okay, well, we need to take a picture of your tattoos. Now, mind you, I didn't have any neck, no hands, no anything. I just had, my whole back was done. I had a little bit on my legs, but it was like up from the elbows up. I took a picture of my tattoos and they sent it up to some fucking brass. And it came back and they said, fucking, nope, no way. You can't be a fucking officer. Not only that, we're not letting you in the Marine Corps nationwide. They put a fucking red hold on me for my tattoos, said I had too much of a percentage of my body was tattooed. So I said, okay, well, the Marine thing's closed. That's fine. That's fine by me. I'll go to the Army. The Army will fucking take me. The Army will take anybody. That's what I was. So I went to the Army and I figured, okay, I'll get a special program, try to be a Green Beret, probably be a Ranger or get some kind of contract like that. Well, and I went into the Army recruiter near my mom's house and they did a preliminary background check and they said, fucking no way. No way. You have too much shit on your background. And that's when I went, oh, fuck. Holy shit. Now this is getting serious, right? I thought I was cleared up, but I was like, man, the decisions you make matter. I went back to my mom's house, rode my fucking bike, because I had no car, rode my bike back to my mom's house, laid on the couch, and that reality of me being a 23-year-old with no prospects, living on my mom's house, riding a fucking bike in my old hometown was sinking onto me. I have like delusional confidence, which is beneficial in some capacities, but when that reality starts to hit, I couldn't even be optimistic about it. I was going, oh shit, this is real. That lasted for about 3 days, me licking my wounds. But during this time, I started to research about the French Foreign Legion. I had already known about it just from being in that world of interest for a while. But that's when I started going, okay, they take guys with checkered backgrounds. If I need to go, I can look red, grab red type thing. Okay, that's a possibility. But I wanted to really make sure because, man, I had fucking student loans. My parents didn't pay for college. My mom didn't, single mom. I fucking had student loans, man, a lot of them. So I was like, fuck. I can't just like pop chalks and leave. I got to finish this shit up and figure this out. And I had that call it higher consciousness or that moment of clarity. I call it fucking God. Told me to get the fuck up, write down my charges on a piece of paper. It was seriously clear as day. Write down your dispositions of your cases, most of them, not all of them, what it was and where you're at with it. And I wrote them down on a piece of paper. And when I wrote them down, they didn't look that fucking bad. Everything was cleared. All the fines were paid. I wasn't on probation. And I wrote like the big ones, right? Strategic honesty. I'm not saying lie, but I'm saying strategic honesty. Everything with major paperwork. And I fucking typed it up. I made it look nice. And I went down to the Navy recruiter. And I just fucking was like waving the white flag at this point. I walked into him and I handed him a piece of paper and I almost didn't talk. I said, can you work with this? And he fucking looked at it, which seemed like a million years. And he looked at it and he penned it back to me and he said, we can work with this. And I went, it was like a fucking dark cloud had lifted off, even for just a moment. And he said, but you are really limited on the jobs you can do. You can fucking like wrangle shit or be a Navy SEAL. Dead serious. He said, there's no fucking in between for you. That's like what you can do. He goes like, because of at the time, they just needed quality candidates to be SEALs and it was just so hard to get guys in there. They wanted fucking some strong dudes in there with possible, and he's like, but you need to pass all these waivers and screening tests and all this stuff. It's not gonna be easy. Not to mention you still have to get into fucking MEPS, Military Entrance Processing Station, and none of it's guaranteed. I said, that's fine. Just give me an opportunity. Let's start down this road. So I started went down the MEPS thing and I went to MEPS and that was fucking scary because I had a lot of strategic answering to do. So we were going through the process and my MEPS was long and a lot of interviews and I had special investigators in coming to my work and fucking interviewing me and all this shit. Mind you, I'm stacking boxes at Home Depot at night, training during the day, or trying to get into MEPS. Now I have the ability to start taking the SEAL screener, the SEAL physical screening test, which is a swim. It's a 500-meter swim, combat side stroke. It's 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, maximum pull-ups, and then a 1.5 mile run. That was what the test was. I went my first day and I jumped in the water on my swim and I pushed off the wall and I remember the water rushing over me and I just had this moment of holy fuck, I'm really like, now I'm trying to do this thing. This is happening. And I fucking failed that day so hard, man. And I failed that day. I was puking on the run. I failed the run and I might have even failed the sit-ups, passed the swim barely. Even though I'm a good swimmer, I grew up swimming, so I'm comfortable in the water. But I failed, and I stood in that line of failure, and I looked around, and went, Kavanaugh, read up my scores, fail, step back. And I looked around, I said, I'm never fucking gonna be in this line again. I need to work harder. This is serious. I need to fucking work harder. I can't just like get by. This is like real shit now. So guess I called my recruiter. I said, what do I do? Who do I fucking talk to really ratchet this shit up? Because I couldn't even run a fucking mile when I started. Dead serious. I ran like 500 meters and I stopped and I'm like, holy fuck. Navy SEALs run. I better fucking do this. I was just too big, too heavy. So he goes, there's a retired lieutenant commander that runs the Naval Special Warfare SEAL Motivator. He's the SEAL Motivator for Vegas, LA, San Diego, that triangle. He said, get with him and figure out what the fuck you're doing. There was also an active duty senior chief who was running runs and workouts. I contacted both of them. I said, let's do it. He said, all right, come down here and let's rock and roll. And those workouts were the fucking hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. Like 2, 3, 4 hour workouts of running and then half mile sprints, serious swims, dead hangs, just all the calisthenics you could possibly imagine, flutter kicks. I was puking every day. I would pack boxes at night, get up, sleep a little bit, then drive down to the Naval Amphibious Base, train, or up at Pendleton where we do runs. I had never run more than 2 miles in my life. So now we're running 5, 6, 7, and I'm puking the entire time every day. And I lost 40 pounds in 6 weeks. So I'm 40 pounds lighter. Now and I'm also the only guy taking the SEAL screener down at the actual military base every week. I'm the only guy there every Monday taking the SEAL screener because I knew I needed waivers. I needed FaceTime with these guys. I needed to pass. Now I'm getting elevated scores every time. Now I'm like the most pull-ups, one of the fastest swims. Now, never the run though. Never the run. Running's for the fucking enemy. That's what I always say. But I would always pass. And the instructors had a running joke. They go, okay, Kavanaugh is the fucking line. If you are in front of him, you will pass. If you are behind him, you're going to fail. And they were right. I mean, I passed everything by like 10 seconds, puking as I crossed. 9 months of that. 9 months it took me. Some guys would come in, they're squeaky clean to get their contract. It took me 9 fucking months. Calling the recruiter every day, hey, is my SEAL contract there? Is this waiver approved? Because I need tattoo waivers, conduct waivers, all these fucking things. And sure enough, I got the right letters of recommendation from those guys, and they were like, this guy's fucking here all the time, and look at his scores. And one day, August 26th, 2009, boom, I got a SEAL contract put down on the desk at the recruiter, and he said, all right, you're fucking shipping on a fucking SEAL contract to boot camp. And I shipped out February 2010 and started that whole process.
Amazing.
Yeah. And that was a powerful day. I remember talking to my dad before I shipped, because I thought, he's like, well, you worried? And I said, man, I'm fucking nervous, like, who the fuck knows why all these people fail? Like, I don't know how far they push you to, I don't know what my line is. My mom said, can you do this? Because I didn't have any fucking proof. She wasn't being disrespectful. She was asking me like, man, can you do this? And I said, I think so. And the truth was, I fucking gave so much of a shit about what people think of me. I was like, I don't think I'll quit because I won't want to look like a fucking candy ass motherfucker. Like, I don't think I'll quit. I don't think, right? But you can't know for sure. And I talked to my dad that night also, and he said, what are you nervous about? I said, how do I stack up? Like, who the fuck are these guys that actually make it into SEALs? Like, who are they? Like, I don't know fucking any SEALs other than the guys that I had come across in the training. So then I shipped, and that was a group of 100 guys. We started boot camp. It's like all SEAL candidates, mind you. This was unique at the time. It was like all SEAL candidates in this boot camp division, and they beat the fuck out of us. It was normal Navy boot camp with a little like, hey, we got SEAL candidate flair on it. And we had a good group, right? Only about 9 guys out of that 100 ended up making it, of that initial boot camp, right? So that's early on, a solid crew. Like, handful of those guys, like 5 or 6, are operating at the tip of the spear, if guys know what I'm talking about, right? And so my best friends, right? All my close friends. And so we had a solid, strong group of guys who were professional baseball players, guys who were all-American football players. Like, so, now I was like around my fucking people. I was like, now we're talking about guys who want to be warriors, not be in the military, want to fucking operate, kick fucking doors open and with night vision on, like serious shit. Cause that's who I identified with, and those who were my people, man. And so it was great times, hard as shit. We make it through. That's 8 weeks. Then we go into Basic Unguarded Demolition Preparatory School in Chicago, which is kind of really was cool. It was just training, 6 hours a day, 3 2-hour blocks. Every day was swimming, running, lifting, every fucking day. Or calisthenics with civilian contractors who were specialists in running, swimming, or lifting. Very cool program. And we worked our ass off. And after that, it's 2 to 4 months, depending upon how your scores are. They test everybody. They take the top 75%, and you fly back to San Diego and we flew back with about 400 guys out of, the group that was, 600 or 700, whoever was there. They fly out with 400 guys. We got into Coronado, checked in, got that whole fucking deal. And by the time that 400, it got chopped to 285 a few weeks later. Most of those guys quit not because it was hard. We hadn't even started training yet, but they just wanted a different job. They knew they already were done with it, with the running and swimming. They just wanted to get to San Diego and get a better job. Strategic planning.